Gather round me, children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. Your doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. Vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Okay, so we're here today with Birgitta Jónsdóttir, who is, wow, I mean, what hasn't she done? She's a poet, an activist, an anarchist. She founded the Pirate Party in Iceland. She's
not a politician.
She's not a politician. She's very clear on that. She's very clear on that. She was involved with WikiLeaks after meeting Julian Assange in Iceland, and she's been involved in court cases against the US government. She's done a lot of stuff. So we're very delighted to have her here. Welcome, Birgitta. So yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing to talk about, given that it's big in the news at the moment, is Julian Assange's extradition case. You're somebody who has more insight than most on Julian as an individual, and obviously the impact that WikiLeaks has had on sort of freedom of the press and attacking various governments around the world. So, how do you think things are going to play out, and what do you think the effect of it is?
Well, I think because WikiLeaks today and WikiLeaks that I was part of, it really changed. So I think it's important to bear in mind that the indictment that he is currently in prison, they're still keeping him in prison until, there's going to be a final say in if they're going to extradite him or not, and that might take up to 6 years. But what he's indicted for is only the leak that Chelsea Manning leaked to WikiLeaks. Yeah. So it's the Afghan war logs, the Iraq war logs, the diplomatic cables, and of course the video with the Reuters photographer and all the civilians that were sort of mowed down casually as collateral murder. And despite all the other stuff, like people have to put that aside and just focus on this particular issue, the extradition request and the indictment behind it, because if he is going to be charged for that, that is a grave threat for journalism, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And, we know that the media is really weak right now, and it's been growing weaker and weaker because how everything transformed with the introduction of the internet in our lives. And I think, if there ever was a time where we need strong investigative journalists, strong media that can sort of counter the growing insanity in our world, then that's a fight that all of us need to take. And since Julian Assange can't defend himself if he's being kept in that particular prison or in any prison, and particularly this prison, which is like a high security prison. I was actually quite shocked when I saw a video of him today. I was really shocked, and I feel really a great need to do whatever it takes to help him because he can't defend himself.
So actually, that's one of the things that I was going to ask you was exactly that. You obviously know him on a personal level. It has been noted in a few different articles that I was reading about the current case that he seems like his mental health is taking a hit is probably the best way to summarise it, but he seems confused and not really fully aware of what's going on. Now, obviously, you know him when you're seeing videos and you're noticing that he's very different to how he was.
I think that, I think he's still clear and lucid. I think that he is just, if you are being kept in isolation for a long time, you become slightly disoriented, and he does not get to meet people a lot, and he is pretty much isolated in the prison. Maybe it's for his own safety or not, I don't know. But this is like a high security prison, and I know that it has also had massive impact on his health. But I actually felt compelled to write to him after I saw that video, and after I read what happened this morning, because I think it's really unfair that they are not given more time to prepare the case. Because, for a while they had to, or just until recently, all sort of sharing of documents and so forth had to be mailed in. So his lawyers had, massive restrictions on working on the case.
Yeah, he has no access to a computer. That's correct, isn't it? He has no access to any computers or anything while he's in there at all.
Yeah, it's like,
understand.
so I think, it's going to be a long, drawn out case, and there must be some way that he can be moved out of the prison. Maybe he could have like an ankle bracelet or something like that. But this, to keep him for so long in prison, without being charged, I think is completely draconian.
Inhumane, isn't it? So, what can we as individuals then, given the huge importance of this in terms of our press freedom, and for Julian Assange personally, what is there that we as individuals can do to try and bring attention to it to advance his case?
Well, I think I think that we already see, big organizations like Amnesty International and various others have started campaigns. I think the most important thing we can do right now is to help people refocus on, just putting aside all the stuff that makes people pissed off. Obviously, many people are pissed off about, the what WikiLeaks was doing around the Trump elections and so forth. But that is not on trial.
Yeah.
Even if people dislike him personally, this is much bigger than that. So maybe the most important thing right now is just to, uh, help put the narrative into the correct focus, which is what is he indicted for, and is there any way in the world that is justifiable that, for
Yeah.
example, that the UK government is aiding the US government in extraditing something into a condition that is a serious threat to that person's life for being, a provider of a media platform that really had a massive impact on our world. And
You have a very
also,
personal. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
and the vendetta is just so massive, not only towards him. They also have put Chelsea Manning in prison again for refusing to testify about something that he already had served time for. So they're trying to punish her twice. And they're also putting like massive fines on her every day. And so she's probably going to be in prison for another year. And there is another person that they have, well, two other persons that a lot of people are not aware of. So one is Jeremy Hammond, who has been in prison for years now because he helped, um, you know, leak or get data from a firm called Structure that they were sort of working for the US government to hatch a plan to take WikiLeaks down and, do a smear campaign on everyone that was affiliated with WikiLeaks, including me and lots of other people, journalists. And and so forth. And Jeremy Hammond was about to be released in December, but the government decided to, before he was released, to demand that he would appear for the same grand jury as Chelsea Manning in regard to the extradition of Assange. And he also refused to appear, so we have no idea when he's going to be released. And then there is Ola Binne, who was arrested in Ecuador, a young guy who, had, met with Assange a few times and was working on massively important projects in regard to open governance and privacy and so forth in Ecuador. And he was just, taken and put in one of these, Latin American prisons, and no charges, And what they're trying to get him for is like, having suspicious books like Chomsky and, dangerous stuff like that. And it's just insane.
And that's the Ecuadorian government.
Yeah. So they claim that he hacked into the president's email or something, but they have no proof. It's just, this happened just the day or the day after Assange was kicked out of the embassy and into prison.
Right.
And then there is one more person that I want to mention that is not related to this, but, inspired by all these whistleblowers. A young woman called Reality Winner who leaked to The Intercept proof that the Russians were interfering. And she's been kept in horrible conditions as well in prison. And it's just like, it's crazy what is being done to both journalists, publishers, and whistleblowers these days.
That's the Intercept. That's the Intercept. Jeremy Scahill works on the podcast and the online magazine around the intelligence community and defence, etc. that you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, Glenn Greenwald started it around the time he was getting the Snowden leak. And of course, Snowden is stuck in Russia, and he wants to go home, but he wants a fair trial, and they're refusing to, secure that. And so, I mean, it's a bit of a mess, but people just have to be really focused. It's so easy to get distracted these days. There's just so many things that are messed up, and it's difficult to find focus. And so, but if we don't have the fundamentals that make people in power, kept at bay and, honest by giving people access to information so that they can be informed citizens in democracy, then we are at a very dangerous crossroads.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose for someone like Chelsea Manning, in the event Assange does end up over in the States for the extradition, there's nothing to stop. I mean, that will be the first part of a case that then goes on where Chelsea Manning will be dragged straight back into this again. And much yourself as well, and many people who are involved at the time will find themselves possibly going through more legal battles at the other side of this again about the same stuff again once they actually get Assange in the country. So to even expect Chelsea Manning to discuss it in any way, shape or form when she knows that it's just going to have a knock-on effect for her going possibly back to jail in 6 years' time because this is going to all come to light, it's a very dangerous situation for pretty much any of them that were involved.
Exactly. I mean, and this is why I can't travel to the States myself, because I was heavily involved in the leaks that Assange is being indicted for. So I co-produced that video. I was a spokesperson at the time and helped with the cables and so forth. So I've been advised by lawyers in the States not to come right now. So it's a shame because I'm actually working for an institute in the States and I can only zoom in. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but it's I'm not afraid of them though. They can just piss off.
I like your attitude. I like your attitude, and it's what you're saying is important as well. You know, I think it's fair to say that Julian probably hasn't had as much support from large sections of the media as he might have done, and that's possibly due to his personality and other things which make people view him as a less than sympathetic character, perhaps. However, you're right. We should have a sense of perspective and really look at this in terms of what he's actually being charged for, what he's actually potentially going to be extradited for, and what it means for freedom of the press worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that's the focus, and that's, I think, by just being ready to maybe push that a little bit and get other people involved. And I mean, it's like there's no point in doing protests like street protests right now and stuff like that. I think the most important thing is just to talk to other journalists and talk to members of parliament and so forth after this Brexit mess, if that's ever going to stop. I don't know. Pretty historical moment tonight, in a little bit, like voting that could have massive consequences for everyone on Britain and the island around it. So it's really weird, like the impact this is having, this sort of level of uncertainty about the future. It's really difficult to get people to think about anything else, and it's sort of paralyzing people for a long time. So just to campaign for anything that's important. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be resolved in some way. I've never seen a nation inflict as much self-destruction without any particular reason as is happening right now. It's just so strange.
And it's paralysing everything. It's paralysing discourse. It's paralysed media. It's paralysed parliament and politics from doing anything worthwhile or useful for the past 3 years. It's all anybody talks about, and there's so much crazy stuff happening around it that people are so focused on it that there's loads of stuff going on that's being missed and not spoken about in the press, corruption, etc. I think like even a lot of the politicians and the sort of financial gains that are being made around Brexit aren't even being focused on nearly as much as they should, because people are so focused on the actual machinations of the process and the legal battles and everything else. They don't have time to look at much else or to talk about much else.
Yeah, I know. And then people say, "Oh, we'll just get it over with," and so forth. But I only have one opinion about this, and that's basically it. That it's been proven that there was fraud around the election. They used Cambridge Analytica. There were people like what's his name, Aaron something.
Aaron Banks.
Yeah, that was like pouring money into this, and and I find it really problematic that both the elections in the US and the Brexit elections were basically hacked, by the abuse of, social media, recklessness, and then, Cambridge Analytica.
But that's it. But a lot of the same people. I mean, essentially Robert Mercer, Steve Bannon, Cambridge Analytica, SCL Group, Nix. Was his first name Gerard?
Alexander Nix.
Yeah.
All of them. These people were all involved in both elections. These people were both involved in Leave campaign. They have direct connections. There's pictures of Farage with like the Mercer family. There's pictures of Boris and Farage and stuff before with Steve Bannon. I mean, we're talking about lots of people who are all involved in both of these elections who have already been found to have hacked, have been involved in social media manipulation essentially, and they're still involved at the present moment as we're going through this Brexit. And you could even argue that it's a great example of what you could do if you wanted the entire country to just be focused on Brexit and nothing else. There's all sorts of things you can do in the background that now nobody's paying attention anymore. It's been a great example of using the political discourse in the US and in the UK at the present moment to just kind of hijack all news, and then nobody's reporting on anything, like things like the fact that Assange's case won't actually happen until February, but he's not allowed to leave jail essentially until now, but there's no reason for him to leave jail because he's not been held for anything. And the argument is that he may leave the country, but no one's talking about it and nobody's really reporting on it. And that's because they've managed to hijack everything to just be about Brexit for so long.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it's really a perversion of democracy, and since it's been proven, it's obvious that the the Brexit referendum was rigged. I don't understand why they're still at it. They should just have another referendum, or at least this ridiculous deal should be brought to the nation. But first, I mean, it's so weird to me that I really thought that the UK system was more developed and advanced. So it's really shocking to me that there could be a referendum that you did not have to state the consequences of yes or no. It's just
Yeah.
it's insane. You just so there was people were just sort of like voting without fact. That's crazy. That is not a good practice of referendum at all.
No,
There
it's
was
not.
no application. There was no independent institution or anybody that prepared it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and like the electoral commission was created in a pre-internet age. It's in no way fit for purpose for the situation we find ourselves in now, with the power of social media and the power of the internet. And unfortunately, I think it's very unlikely that anything will be done about the fraud of the Leave campaign when you have Dominic Cummings, who was the brains behind Leave.eu, sitting pulling the strings in number 10 at the moment and advising Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And do you know what? This is this whole rhetoric, and just like you were saying, like, there are all these things happening in the background. And the sad thing is that the people that are now fighting one another are the ones that should be fighting together for basic rights. The austerity that's been happening in the UK in the last 10 years is so draconian. There are so many people that have died because of it. It's not just like 10 people. There are like thousands of people that have died because of the austerity policies of the conservative government. And nobody talks about it. It's not headline news. It's like it's like a it's like a failed state.
We have the poor fighting the poor at the most, probably the worst that I've witnessed in my life, where the poor are so pitted against the poor and are so forgiving the rich ruling class at the present moment, even though it's abundantly clear that the poor are getting poorer in the UK to the point where they will argue with the sixth richest economy in the world, but we still have every year there are more and more children on the streets. Because, like, you know what I mean? There's more and more people who with existing illnesses dying. It's a strange dynamic to be in at the present moment. Yet people will just now argue about immigration from Europe. I mean, like that's what they're arguing about. It's so crazy.
It is, and I mean, just think about all the people. I mean, and it's such a one-way street. I mean, like Iceland is part of Schengen, for example. Even if we're not a part of the EU, we're part of the EA, and we're members of Schengen. And obviously, when there is growth, you need labor, more labor than you have in your country. But also, I mean, when we had the financial crisis in Iceland, so many Icelanders were economic refugees that went to other countries to find work because we all of a sudden had so much unemployment. And we tend to forget, and this is like a tendency I feel that is so selfish. So you're happy to have, for example, so many pensionists from Iceland and from the UK and other countries have moved to Europe to have a better life because their pension money is so low. They can't survive in their own countries. Uh, and we're happy to have our people migrate to Europe, but we don't want the Europeans to come to our third. It's just, um, I think, I think that the EU, in a sense, was sort of, there's been a lot of talk about that it needs to restructure itself. And that has also not been at all very much on the forefront of the debate. Uh, because, if Europe is going to fall apart, what are we going to have then? But how do we want to see it work? Um, you know, it was quite shocking how many people from that are against the European Union decided they wanted the European Union to pay their salaries as MEPs. It's just like
So,
everything is so bizarre.
one thing I'd like to ask you, Birgitta, as somebody who was a representative in Iceland, who was involved in your assembly in your own country, who was involved in founding a political party. What sort of insight did you gain to the inner workings of a democracy, inner workings of the sort of parliamentary system, etc.?
Mhm.
What did you learn from that?
Well, thank you for asking, because one of the main reasons, um, I ran for the first time, like I first actually helped create another political movement just in the wake of the financial crisis that was meant to go inside the parliament and work on sort of the fundamental system changes, like through facilitating a crowdsourced constitution and for example, that a state or the people of a state should never pay the debt of private debt collectors like the banks
Yeah.
and so forth. We should not socialize private debt. And I never fantasized or dreamt of becoming a parliamentarian. I have zero respect for power and authority. Always been a bit of a punk, and raised up on crash lyrics and stuff like that. uh, so I wanted to find ways to sort of be kind of a Robin Hood of power, where I would figure out ways to take the power from the powerful and give it to the powerless. And I was really focusing on and aiming for and hoping for that we could have more direct democracy in Iceland and more initiatives and incentive for people to participate in being part of shaping the democracy they want to live in, the society they want to live in. Because, the problem we have in our societies, as we have grown and there are more and more people in each country and more people behind each representative, it's sort of impossible to serve properly, if you know what I mean. If you're
Yeah.
representing so many people, you can't really do it properly. But at the same time, the problem with parliament, and it's the same problem everywhere, is that we say we live in democracy, which basically means democracy means the rule of the people. We say that we have representatives and we have parliament, They're supposed to be the lawgivers, right?
Yep.
Parliamentarians, they don't write laws. They shouldn't be lawyers. We should not have except maybe one lawyer as a parliamentarian, to be honest. Because the laws have become so complicated, and they're like code that you sort of mix together all different types of code, that it's just some is redundant and some is new, and it's impossible to amend it or know
Yeah,
what it
and it's
is.
indecipherable to the layman as well. Like legally, they have their own way of speaking, etc.
Exactly. So what I discovered, to my shock, I mean, we were in like full-fledged crisis in Iceland. It was the fifth largest financial collapse in the history of the world, right?
Yeah.
It was a bit of a mess. Uh, and so I sort of expected when I accidentally got into parliament that everyone would sort of like go up on deck and just, work together, no matter
Yeah.
from what sort of political party they came from. This was like a massive task to, you know, deal with the situation that was crisis. We had IMF and everything, the first Western country ever to have IMF
Yeah.
controlling our financial sort of policies. But instead of that, it was just a game. I mean, and it was obvious the parliament had very little power. Everyone just said, we're just processing machines. We are like just stamping the laws. And yet they did nothing to change it. Do you know what I mean? It's like if there was a
Yeah.
will, there are more parliamentarians than there is government, right? So if the parliament wanted to have that power, they could easily have done it. And I gave them a really good example by I actually did something in parliament that nobody's ever done before, and unfortunately nobody's done it after, which was basically I put together a parliamentary resolution that became world known as the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, which was to make Iceland into a digital safe haven for all the
Yeah.
forbidden knowledge, for all the stuff that governments don't want you to have access to. So basically, to
Yeah.
utilize something like WikiLeaks and to make it easy for people to be sources and whistleblowers and to strengthen media in this new digital landscape. And, it involved for the government to write 10 laws in 4 different ministries. And I managed to get somebody prominent from every party to be on it. People that I knew that someday might become ministers. And
Uh-huh.
I managed to get it unanimously adopted. And I'm also managed to get the government to work on it. And not only that government, but all the governments after, that parliament was dissolved. And now the prime minister actually, I convinced her, the current prime minister, to finish it. And all the laws have been made, and they are now in process in parliament. And
So
I was in the tiniest party. We were 3 in this party, right?
yeah.
But what I did was I worked with people from all over the world, including Assange and Daniel Domscheit-Berg, and journalists and people that use Freedom of Information Acts professionally and so forth. And we wrote this in English in an Etherpad, uh, and then I translated to Icelandic, and I got some really brilliant help by one of the
Yeah.
staff in the parliament. I had workshops in the parliament with Assange and various other people, and to explain what this was. And if somebody from the tiniest party, a total nobody, could do this, then why aren't parliamentarians doing this more?
Yeah.
Seasoned parliamentarians that know all the, maybe it was because I had no idea how things worked. So I just thought this is a good idea. I'm just gonna go for it.
Yeah. I'm just going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, so just to fully understand, so what the outcome of that will be is that the Icelandic Parliament will have full digital transparency, that the public will be able to search any records, they will be able to see exactly what is going on in terms of the running of the country, and everything is entirely open and available to any individual to look up.
No, it's not really about that, but we did actually
Right.
force the parliament to, as a changes in Freedom of Information Act, the
Okay.
parliament could no longer sort of, abstain from being obliged to hand over, data from the parliament or information.
Right. Okay.
But the idea was to, for example, change the laws about the liability of intermediaries. The laws around intermediaries were changed quite a bit, so all over Europe and in the world. So people hosting data, they were forced to take down stuff if it was flagged as possibly copyright infringement or whatnot. So a lot of stuff has been taken down, that was flagged, but was maybe not copyright infringement, but actually stories about corruption or whatnot by powerful entities in our
Yeah.
world. That
Okay.
was
So you've
one
made
part
it
of it.
much.
Source protection as well. The hardest bit has been to remove data retention. Really difficult to get the government or parliament to actually do that. That's the last fight in it. I got them to write a whistleblowing act that includes both the public and the private sector. So basically, it was just like a data set. What we did, we collected data from all these different countries that had good laws that ensured these protections of the data. Let's say you are a journalist in Hong Kong or in Tibet or in Kurdistan or any of these places where you are a minority dealing with draconian authorities, and you are willing to put your life at risk to get the story out about what's really going on.
Yeah.
What we were aiming at was to create a place in the world where that particular data, that particular story could be kept up no matter what. We could not protect the person writing it if they weren't in Iceland, but we could protect what they were risking their lives to have the world see.
Yeah.
So that was the idea behind it. Same applies to, because I'm sure you're aware of, like, the UK has one of the worst media laws in the world.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to hold powerful people to an account because they made all these injunctions that makes it really easy for a judge to stop a story
Yeah.
before it becomes a story, if it's about the royals or the stars or politicians or heads of large corporate sectors and so forth. And it's quite common that stories are either changed before they're published or just after they're published. And that's
Yeah.
very problematic. I remember when I was starting to work with WikiLeaks, there was this story from BBC. They had made a documentary about this horrible pollution oil kind of thing that was dumped on the Ivory Coast and the impact it had on the people there by this Dutch company called Trafigura or something. And
Okay.
the BBC had been threatened by this company, and they took down the video, the documentary, because they didn't want to go in a legal battle. So if you think about
Yeah.
in the UK and in many other countries, but in particular the UK, the legal division of the big media outlets are now bigger, much bigger than the investigative journalist department.
Yeah.
And so, how in the world are we going to hold people accountable and have functional democracy if all journalists do is to copy paste, stories that are in the mainstream media. I mean, it's like most of it is just so absolutely superficial, and so we never get the depth that we should really have access to. So you have to look at laws that deal with these things in a holistic manner, so that it actually protects all the different processes of getting that information to the general public.
Well, I mean, interestingly, when we done the stuff about the SEL group and Cambridge Analytica, the original piece that we were working off included information surrounding Google, essentially.
Eric Schmidt and his daughter. Yeah.
Schmidt and his
Oh,
daughter.
yeah.
But that was then redacted in later versions of the same article. So, and then they were not included in stuff anymore.
Really?
So there's an example of what we were doing, which obviously without being 100% sure, but I would imagine the legal team of Google is quite strong, and they probably showed up and explained that piece of information was going to get removed, and certainly the piece of information was then removed from the story. So it means that people who came to this story later, and as the story only really broke a year after Carol's original piece, as in became really big in the media, only at that point were people reading it, and they weren't getting that piece of information. But one of the people that we work with, or that we've done other stuff with, their website, is it Byline Times? Is that what Michael's called? Byline?
No, they're Bywire.
Bywire, yeah. So they have a website now that's all ran on the back end of Chainlink. Blockchain.
Yeah,
but blockchain essentially. So, and then essentially it then prevents you from being able to pull it because it's not in the one place. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that's how their website is actually then hosted, I believe. They've done a lot of work in that and recently got various certifications to allow them to be able to use it for other things. He could probably explain it much better than I, but it'd be something interesting that, based on what we're talking about here, where you can actually use it to be putting up media that would be much harder for them to pull and edit and take advantage of because it doesn't exist in the one location as it has before, so you don't have to worry about the legal ramifications of just showing up, pulling it down, and then the general public would be able to see it. So
that's really brilliant.
there is,
I mean, that's really brilliant. And I think, I mean, it's like, obviously, if the laws in Iceland had been passed immediately, it would have, been much more impactful. And that's another thing that makes Parliament so weak, is that, or just government so useless in many ways, is that they cannot deal with urgent transformations and changes. And so I'm really glad to hear about this particular solution. I think that's quite good. And it solves a lot of the problems that we were trying to do here in Iceland. I mean, there is a bunch of stuff hosted here, and it was already hosted even if we had not actually gotten one of the important laws in place. Just everybody thought it was in place. And and I think, fortunately, I mean, I was actually just starting to threaten some people in government, saying, I'm going to expose that these laws are not in place. If you're not going to make them into place, I cannot take the chance that, let's say somebody from, Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International is hosting sensitive data in Iceland because they believe that these protections are in place, and then they're not. I mean, it's like, so I think that, when it comes to parliaments and so forth, I mean, it was a very useful experience to go in there and figure out how things work. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend. The thing is, like, Icelandic Parliament has almost only new people, and most of them don't have a clue how things really work. They don't have any sort of institutional knowledge, so it's really easy to play them. It's really easy, and I really think that, like, Well, actually, I think that the Scottish Parliament was sort of built, because it's relatively new, and it's sort of built on different principles than, for example, the Parliament in Westminster and the Parliament in Iceland and most of the others. For example, how the role of the speaker is very different in the
Yeah.
Scottish Parliament than in other parliaments. And sort of simple little things like having a daycare center for staff and parliamentarians makes it possible for younger people to come in and participate, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But if you want to change things, there has to be sort of like a very, very much effort put into restructuring the systems we've created. The current systems, if you're going to try to go inside and change things from within, forget about it. It's just not going to happen. Doesn't matter if you have a pirate party or a green party or, I don't care what party. It all becomes a little bit like cults, because
Yeah.
you are like, it's us and them kind of dynamics. You can't criticize anyone, or it's jeopardizing the trust in it, or it's just horrible. It's a
I
fucking
think,
horrible thing, and nobody, in with a sane mind should go and try to do things there. I think people should put effort into preparing for the next crisis. You're going to have massive crisis in the UK, and it would be very good if people, would be putting an effort into hammering out in as crowd sort of inclusive process as possible. What type of society are you gonna be? How do you want to sort of have your, like, is the educational, health, financial systems sustainable? For
yeah.
example, I don't
I,
understand if you want to go and educate yourself. Like, I want to educate myself and get a particular education, and I can't do it. I have to take all this crap that I have no interest in investing my time in. That's why I've never gone to normal schools, because I don't want to learn certain things. I don't want to learn things just to learn them, if you know what I mean.
yeah, you want to learn it because you have a specific interest in it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and
I
for
think,
some
like,
people, they want to learn things just to learn things. That's fine. They can get that type of education. But why does everybody else have to do it?
yeah, no, I get that, and I think what you're talking about in terms of how difficult wholesale political reform from the ground up is in an entrenched, old democracy and old parliament like Westminster. I think that's one of the things that I personally found so appealing about the idea of Scottish independence. It would be an opportunity to write a constitution from scratch, to design a new system, and like you say, the opportunity to crowdsource, to get input from the people who make up a society as to how that society should be ran. I really loved the idea that was put forward in Iceland for like essentially like a kind of crowdsourced constitution where people could suggest laws and they'd be voted. Everybody had an opportunity to participate in it, and I believe, unfortunately, it ultimately wasn't implemented. Right?
No, it was actually yesterday, 7 years since we had that referendum, and we still don't have our new constitution, because it was like the Brexit referendum. It was
Advisory.
non-binding, yeah, but
Yeah.
much more people, percentage-wise, participated and also wanted it, and
Yeah.
still the government got away with ignoring it. And the current prime minister is not gonna do it. She played a key role in just caving in and giving up. When we should have taken the fight in the parliament. But I don't think we had majority for it actually. But it's like you can't do a referendum where the parliament specifically asked the nation to tell what they wanted the parliament to do and then just ignore it because you don't like it. It's just unbelievable. But
It's not democracy, is it?
no, it's not. But I think, I think, and I really hope, because you have like a good start in Scotland, and that's why I'm sort of, contemplating to move away from Iceland maybe in a couple of years or something, and Scotland keeps coming up in my mind as a good place, because there's some energy there that's interesting and vibrant, and just the idea that, just wouldn't it be cool if, like, instead of, if you would have, a House of Commons, and then you could also have like a House of Commoners, like a sortition kind of parliament where people would be randomly selected to serve for
Yeah.
a term, because if you have that kind of system, then you are always going to have to be sort of prepared to serve, if you know what I mean. But you could do it also for, and I really think that we need to learn to build communities again, to build our own communities where we live, to make them more inclusive, and that people not only are given the possibility to participate, but you should participate in shaping your community. It's not.
Yeah, and decentralizing power a little bit as well.
Yes, it has to happen, and particularly because of all the other challenges that we are faced with. I mean, there is a financial crisis, global financial crisis, coming. There's going to be food shortages because of extremes in weather, and changes in climate, and just this recklessness that we've had towards the future, the way we, just allowed ourselves to believe that there was no consequence for our lifestyles, of utter gluttony, this like
Yeah.
crazy stuff. And so, I mean, it's like, I've very often been very poor in my life, and and I'm actually again quite poor, and I sort of, like, I've never been rich, but I didn't have to worry about paying a mortgage and stuff like that when I was in Parliament. I had like a regular paycheck, but
Yeah.
it is sort of a relief, because it's hard to be poor, but at the same time it makes you sort of just be content a little bit with, make more things out of what you have. You don't have to have 5 pairs of shoes. It is not a necessity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, of course.
Enough to have maybe 2 pairs, or something, and just wear things out, finish them. And when we had the crisis in Iceland, everything sort of slowed down, and people started to do stuff in their own hands again. I'm not saying that you should like become, a lot of the new sort of, lot of the technology we have today. I'm deeply thankful. I love my washing machine. Anybody that
Yeah.
washed by hand will not want to give up their washing machines. But is it necessary for, if like there are 3 flats in this house I live in, do we all need to have our own washing machine? Could we maybe just all have one and share it? These kind of things, that would actually build community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but that's another story. But I think in general, if we are going to sort of take the crazy out of democracy, then we're gonna have to become engaged demo. We're gonna have to in nurture this garden. It's not gonna take care of itself. If you just let
I think.
and actually John Lennon said in an interview ages ago, that people have a tendency to want to transfer power to politicians. It's sort of like a relationship with a father figure, a patriarch. And, then you
Yeah.
just blame daddy for, everything that goes wrong if he messes up, if you know what I mean, or is unreasonable, or and so forth. And so that needs to change. There is nobody gonna come and save us.
Well, absolutely. It's something that when you were talking about, just when we spoke about the decentralization of power, like the advantage, kind of you touched on it already, would be that you would have to be ready to take up the position at some point. So, and then everyone has to be more informed. You don't then get into a scenario with Brexit where people are like, well, I didn't know what I was voting for, or I don't really know what the EU does, because by definition, all these things that are happening in your life, you now have to have some basic understanding, because at some point or another, you may be called up to represent your community or your particular skill set, and then it means that you have to be more engaged, you have to be more aware. You don't really allow that for just exactly what you were saying there. You don't allow the can't someone else do it type mentality, where that's a politician's job, so I don't need to know anything about the ins and outs of how I trade with this place, because you don't need to know that, because that's what a politician does. You wouldn't have that advantage, so everyone would have to stay more engaged and have a better understanding of the way that their community and their world around them runs.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you don't have to be, and that's another sort of misunderstanding about the role of the politician. So I consider myself to be sort of a plug-in for the power and the people. So, for example, I was like a living Freedom of Information Act for individuals and organizations that needed to get some information out of the government, because the government was obliged to provide me with information. Why
Yeah.
is that so? Why is it not so that the government, just in general, the government, the system is obliged to provide the citizens or the organizations with the information that they're requesting, you know? Uh, and it's like, but I would just tell people, oh, they would tell me, and I'm having difficulties getting this information or answers to this and that. Then I would just say, write out what you need, and I'll prepare like a written request to the government. Um, and so I think, you know, the and we were also told, like, we cannot get engaged in individual cases. We have to look holistically at the system, blah blah blah. But the thing is that there is no way for anybody in society to red flag flaws in the laws. That's why Elon Musk said, and I totally agree with him. He was asked about his dream society on Mars. I certainly don't want to join Elon Musk on Mars. I want to try
Okay.
to save the planet. I really like this particular planet. I love it very much. Um,
Yeah.
but he said that it should be more, it should be based on direct democracy, and that the laws should be simplified. And so, if any country wants to sort of build a new structure or a new system, simplify the laws so that everyone understands them. Because currently, we are living with the law god that's really punishing, and we never know when we're breaking the laws or whatnot, because they're just so complicated. And those that are supposed to enforce them, they only enforce them for the 99%, but not the 1%, and so forth. And that's bound to create the scenarios that we're seeing today, where people are falling through the cracks and they're blaming all the wrong people for it.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of apathy as well. Like people don't believe that they can affect change anymore, because they they have they have not been able to for their entire lives. I mean, Thatcher in this country took away a lot of the power of the unions, the ability to strike. We saw what happened with the miners in the 80s when they tried to stand up against the state, and the state used the full power available to it to squash the unrest. And I think people in the UK learned from that we can no longer change things. Thankfully, the Scottish independence movement, the referendum, seems to have engaged the Scottish population significantly. And I think, when you spoke earlier about that kind of energy and that vibe that Scotland has, I think that has a lot to do with it. People re-engage with politics in a way that they hadn't done for quite a long time. Uh, And yeah, I think Iceland's loss would certainly be Scotland's game if you ever do decide to come over here, Birgitta.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, there's one thing I noticed as well, since I'm a poet first, and I sometimes call myself a poetician, that the sort of the poetry scene, the spoken word scene in both England and Scotland is very strong and vibrant and amazing. And they're just, if people haven't sort of gone out and experienced some of these young spoken word artists, they should really do it and be blown away with their, incredible sort of way of both being brutally honest and have a very deep level of understanding on how society works. It's usually the artists that you should seek for guidance when you're reshaping the structure of society. And so, and then you have the technocrats sort of framing it, but you have the creative people and the people that know how to investigate and are sort of, the people that you would usually call queer or odd or fringe. These are the people that have the minds that can actually reshape the structure of societies. And if there ever was time for that, it's now. And I think if we can get more people, why not, use whole classes at universities in, working on this? I want to see a blueprint. We can start with like imagine is a pretty good blueprint, and how would we execute it? This simple stuff. Social
Yeah,
agreement is pretty simple stuff. We just want to be happy. In general, and happiness can never be achieved if we get it by squashing others.
I think that's a perfect sentiment to finish on, Birgitta. It's been really interesting and inspiring talking to you. You're a seriously inspirational woman, and like I say, we would love to have you in Scotland. Please come and live here and try and teach us how we can make our society better.
And independent Scotland would certainly benefit from a pirate party as well. So there's always going to be an option there for you in the event we do get independence.
Never going into Parliament again. You could not get wild horses to drag me into that. But I am very happy to help and just be part of, like, I'm usually, if I do something, I go all in if I feel it's something that, I'm flowing with. And, and I like energy where people are not afraid and, are sort of don't have too much respect for authority and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Or power. Power is just an illusion. I mean, usually those that seek power are the ones that don't know how to how to use it. The only way to use power is to give that power away.
Yeah, I think Billy Connolly once said, "Don't vote for politicians; it only encourages them."
I'm not saying people shouldn't vote. I mean, it's a right.
I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
But at the same time, I really think that we need to be putting effort and energy into thinking about other things, like you were saying. Let's do crowdsourced Scottish constitution. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That's the dream. That's the dream.
So
Well, it's been great talking to you, Birgitta, and hopefully we get a chance to do it again sometime.
absolutely, and just keep on going, guys. And I hope I see you next year at Byline.
Oh,
Oh,
you
you definitely
definitely
will. I
will.
think we're going to. There may be a possibility that we're more involved in the festival next year. It looks like we might be doing a bit more podcast stuff, maybe a stage or whatever. So
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, we
Well,
might get
that's
a chance
fun.
to interview you
Yeah, I mean, let's just be in touch, and I'll keep on listening to your very weird and wacky podcast. Which is fun and informative. All right, take care.